Hello. Hello, hello. You ready?
Yep.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is a meeting of the public hearing by the Planning Board, City of Revere. Roll call.
Mr. Miko? Here. Mr. Chiroloni? Here. Del Vecchio? Here. Mr. Desaloni? Here. Mr. Devo?
Here.
Mr. Giovanni? Here. Mr. Lemonna? Absent. Mr. McKenna?
Present. So now, Mr. Stringy would like to read a couple of communications into the record.
First of all, this is a continuation of a public hearing in respect to the petition of Caddy Farm LLC, 118 Main Street, Malden, Mass, requesting approval of the City of Revere for the acceptance, layout, and dedication of certain ways in the City of Revere, as shown on the petitioner's plan entitled Plan of Land on Revere, dated September 30, 2019, and revised December 13, 2019, prepared by Hayes Engineering. Civil engineers from 603 Salem Street, Wakefield, Mass. There's a communication from State Representative Donald H. Wong to dear members of the Revere Planning Board. I apologize for not being able to attend tonight's meeting, but as a state representative for Saugus, I wanted to submit my concerns to your honorable body relative to the Caddy Farms proposal that is currently before you. After careful consideration of this proposal, the plans show proposed Muzzy Street connections to Eustace Street, Hood Street, and Laurel Road in Saugus, along with a primary entrance on Route 1. This will affect a large area of Saugus, affecting residents mainly in Precinct 2, Precinct 4, and Precinct 6. But I believe it will go much further than this. Residents who live off of Salem Street have expressed serious concerns about the potential traffic impacts of a Muzzy Street, Revere to Eustace Street, Saugus connection. Though I understand the intention of this proposal is not to route vehicles to and from the site via Salem Street, the door would be open for that to happen, which is concerning to neighbors and to myself. Saugus residents strongly feel that access to the site should be constructed via Route 1 connection, not through a residential neighborhood that could potentially increase traffic on Salem Street, impacting both Saugus and North Revere. Understanding there is a safety hazard without having a secondary entrance egress of such a large site, the Muzzy Street to Eustace Street connection should be considered and granted only as an emergency access roadway in addition to a Route 1 connection. State Representative Donald H. Wong. There's a communication by State Representative, let's see, Rosalie Vincent. I know I have it here. I got one. I apologize, I cannot find that communication. I know it was sent this morning to your representative's office. And it basically stipulated the same concerns as Representative Wong, that Eustace Street connection be not allowed only for emergency access and maintenance vehicles. There's another communication to the planning board by Joseph Ficcione, 31 Wamisit Ave in Saugus. And it's extensive notice. I will read it to the record. My name is Joe Ficcione, Precinct 2 Town Meeting Member, recently elected in Saugus. I have been a resident of Precinct 2 for my 28 years in Saugus. I write you in regard to the proposed Muzzy Street layout in the Caddy Farms plot of land. I attended the planning board meeting on November 19th that was postponed in short notice to December 9th and again rescheduled to January 21st. In the time between the November 19th meeting and the upcoming meeting, I was able to review the proposed plans dated December 7, 2019, which I shared and discussed with the residents of Saugus and North Revere, many of whom have written the planning board will be in attendance on the 21st. On December 7th, plans show proposed Muzzy Street connections to Eustace Street, Laurel Street, and Hood Street in Saugus. The overarching grievances Saugus and North Revere residents have with the proposed plan with these connections to Saugus streets, residential, dead-end, and tertiary roads located in thickly settled neighborhoods. It's important to note at the forefront that I have no objection to development at Caddy Farms. It's been a long underutilized plot of land. In fact, I am interested to see what is to become of the land. Presents ample opportunity for economic development. With that said, it is imperative to keep a development of this scale in use solely in the Route 1 corridor. The reasons are as follows. Eustace Street, Laurel Road, and Hood Street are all low-density residential dead-end roads in neighborhoods. These roads and the infrastructure were not designed, built, or maintained to be a throughway. They were not meant to have direct access to an arterial road such as Route 1. In fact, both Eustace Street and Hood Street are specifically listed in a restrictive covenant dated April 20th, 1988, which at the time, the land in reference was owned by Rich Chang Waylus. The covenant states that there should be no access or egress to or from these streets from commercially zoned land for any commercial purpose in perpetuity. This covenant establishes the interests of Saugus and further supplements the notion that these roads, along with the other roads listed in the covenant, cannot handle an increase in volume they will see by being transformed into a throughway. Second, the development lies in both Revere and Saugus. The developer has lobbied for zoning uniformity for the entire 47-acre site. The Revere plot is zoned for highway business, while the Saugus plots of land have not yet been rezoned by Saugus Town meeting. The developer, according to 2015 meeting with Saugus Economic Development Committee, seeks rezoning for the Saugus plots to the Highway Business Sustainable Development Overlay District, a zoning overlay that Saugus Town meeting established in 2015. This is to be consistent with the recent Saugus redevelopments such as Essex Landing and the Avalon at Hilltop. The common denominator is the term highway in both Revere and Saugus zoning designations. While a site plan illustrating the proposed uses has not been presented to either Saugus or Revere planning boards preceding this meeting, based on previous proposals and presentations, it's accurate to say that the site use is unlikely to be low-density residential development that's aligned with the context of Eustace Street, Laurel Street, and Hood Street at this juncture. Given this hypothesis, the scale and use of the plots make the Caddy Farms development in Muzzy Street suitable only for a highway connection, given the infrastructure proposed in the plans and the existing infrastructure currently in place. If you look at Saugus as a precedent, all roads serving mixed-use developments built under the 2015 zoning overlay feed to and from the highway as to not overtax the local roads or disturb abutting residential neighborhoods. As a town meeting member, I would support rezoning for the Saugus plots of Caddy Farms if the conditions are consistent with the other Route 1 developments, with sole access to the site being to and from highway as intended as part of the zoning overlay. The residents that I have written letters to, and the several who will sit before you on January 21st are present because their future is uncertain. Their way of life is being threatened, and the fabric of their neighborhoods could be altered significantly and adversely. Many residents have been living on these dead-end tertiary roads for 30 to 40 years, not knowing that their dead-end street could become a throughway directly connected to the highway. The most upsetting thing here is that this is unavoidable. This is avoidable. This development does not need to connect to these roads. Furthermore, there are ample opportunities within this large expanse of land to connect a service road suitable for emergency apparatus, if required, outside of the thickly settled neighborhoods that developer intends to connect to. It begs the question What would you do if you were in this situation? As a town meeting member in one of the affected precincts, I cannot in good conscience ignore the proposal which would significantly increase traffic and wear on Saugus roads and neighborhoods with virtually no benefit to the town from an economic, infrastructural, or environmental standpoint. I cannot see the residents of these quiet and serene roads have their roads reduced to a cut-through to Route 1 via this new development. They must be protected, and it is our duty in government, first and foremost, to protect our neighbors and our residents. I conclude by saying once again that I am not pushing for any sort of ban or overregulation on the use of catty farms. It is not my intention to impede on another city's economic development. It is my desire that Revere and Saugus collaborate on developing these parcels in a manner that is consistent with the goals and priorities of both communities in mind. As a first step, in what I aspire to be a collaborative process, I simply ask that the planning board respect and protect the residents of Eustace Street, Laurel Street, Hood Street, and the greater Saugus and North Revere communities by holding off on any action on this petition, and encourage the developer to work collaboratively with Saugus and Revere officials so that the interests of all parties, including the developer, can be addressed. This is Joseph J. Vescioni, Saugus Town Meeting member. Okay. I know. There's a communication by Richard C. Serino, Ward 6 City Councilor. Dear members of the Revere Planning Board, I once again apologize for not being able to attend this afternoon's meeting due to work, but I wanted to submit comments to you relative to the updated proposed roadway layout plan and profile for Muzzy Street, dated December 16, 2019, and prepared by Hayes Engineering. As I stated in my November letter, and after further discussion with neighborhood residents, I do not oppose the creation of roadways within the confines of the property to further define the site. And I am excited for future economic development proposals and opportunities for the Caddy Farm and Wayloos properties that will hopefully enhance the City of Revere's commercial interest and tax base. I expressed in November, I remain concerned about extending Muzzy Street and the potential unintended consequences a Eustace Street connection will have on the residents of North Revere further down the pipeline. It is unfair to the residents I represent in North Revere, as well as to the people who live in the quiet neighborhood right over the municipal line in Saugus, for a major development to utilize as a primary entrance exit point a residential street when the site in question is adjacent to a major thoroughfare like Route 1. Accordingly, I strongly believe that a site as large as Caddy Farms needs Route 1 access in order to move forward. Anything short of Route 1 access will have a negative impact on neighborhood residents in both North Revere and Saugus in the future when the site is built out. My concerns having been clearly heard and understanding the desire and preference of the property owner to utilize Route 1 as the main entrance and egress to the site via Muzzy Street, Revere to Traer Street, Saugus connection, I'd be amenable to your honorable body approving the proposal before you on the conditions that 1, this plan be conceptual in nature, and 2, that should be the owner wish to move forward in physically constructing the roadways and he does not have a Muzzy to Traer connection approval, that he shall come back before the Revere Planning Board and Revere City Council for final review and approval. A special provision should also be made to stipulate that any Muzzy Street, Revere to Eustace Street, Saugus connection in the future shall only be for emergency access for first responders, not for use by construction vehicles or the general public. I hope that all parties, including the property owner, the City of Revere, and the Town of Saugus, can work together toward a Traer-Muzzy connection for Route 1 access. This would be far preferable to any plan that utilizes residential neighborhood streets in Saugus and North Revere as anything other than an emergency access route, and in my opinion, would be the responsible course of action for planning of this site. Thank you for your consideration. Richard J. Serino, Revere City Councilor. Okay. You're welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Revere Planning Board. I'm going to hand out some documents that I'd like to reference during my presentation, and then the presentation of Peter Ogren of Hayes Engineering that will go over the proposal for the extension of Muzzy Street, a public way in the City of Revere. So, Mr. Stringy, this is 15 copies of the plan.
I'm also passing out correspondence from Robert O'Brien, Economic Development Director for the City of Revere. Planning board members.
And Mr. Streeter, I'm going to hand you and the members the letter from the City Engineering Department of the City of Revere, which is, he submitted his letter of approval. And two other things for the members to look at briefly before the meeting, before my presentation. One is it's an A&R plan signed by the City of Revere, but it shows the entire site, and so that you can identify what land is held by Caddy Farm. No, this right here. And finally, I have a letter written to Mr. O'Brien, Director of Economic Development, essentially commenting on his proposed conditions that have been presented to you this day. So, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Board of the City of Revere, Caddy Farm has submitted a petition in accordance with Section 1212 of the Revere Revised Ordinances, seeking the approval, acceptance, layout, and dedication of the extension of Muzzy Street, a public way in the City of Revere. The Muzzy Street extension is shown on a plan done by Hayes Engineering, plan of land dated December 13th, 2019. So that is the plan before you, which is a little different than the previous plan filed in the first hearing. The city engineer has reviewed this plan and has written a letter to the city council and to you, establishing his grant of approval to this particular laying out of Muzzy Street extension. Also, there's a letter that Mr. O'Brien wrote, and in response to our various communications, but essentially in support of the proposal to grant the extension of Muzzy Street as a public way. And he has several conditions that he's recommending the board look at. So I responded in a letter of January 21, 2020, essentially to focus the committee on three particular conditions. I've worked with Mr. Stringy, and hopefully we can meet, have a meeting of the minds on those three proposed changes. The purpose of this particular petition is to extend Muzzy Street, a public way in the city of Revere, since 1916. Since that time, the planning board, on October 22nd, 2008, endorsed an A&R plan for the Schultz family. Now, those of us who know this area know that the Schultz family was a Revere resident who lived on Muzzy Street in Revere. And he lived there for years, until my clients purchased his property along with other property in the city of Revere. Mr. Schultz lived right here. So to say that at some point Eustace Street was a dead-end street seems a little facetious. Mr. Schultz literally lived there for decades, until such time my clients chose to knock his property down and begin a long-term development. In December 6, 2011, this board extended and altered Muzzy Street such that the street would come down from its original 160 feet of public way to an additional so many feet to reach the then proposed Vietnamese church. Eustace Street is the only access to the Caddy Farm property. The Caddy Farm property is depicted in yellow on the plans that I've presented to you. The entire proposed project is 46.3 acres of land. And one can look at that as if it was going to be one project. But there's no guarantee that that's going to happen. It all will depend on getting Saugus Route 1 access. 20 Bennett Street, the former Whalers property, is 13.7 acres. Caddy Farm in Revere is 28.6 acres, and Caddy Farm owns 4 acres, you'll see up in the quadrant here, in the town of Saugus. The two particular streets that this developer wishes to access in Saugus to get to Saugus Route 1 is Trahere Street and Mildred Street. And if you look at the plans I submitted to you, and Mr. Ogren will draw your attention, there are two paper streets located here and here in the town of Saugus that we would like to develop in order to reach Saugus Route 1. Make no mistake about it that the presentation before you, the petition before you, is to enhance the efforts of Republic Properties, the developer and the owners, Caddy Farm LLC and 20 Bennett LLC, to gain Saugus Route 1 access. The presentations before the town of Saugus will show Trahere Street. And as you can see, Trahere Street is a dead-end street, dead ends at the town line. Muzzy Street, as we propose our extension, connects to that dead-end street and allows the free flow of traffic through two cul-de-sacs. I submitted a letter to Mr. O'Brien, and we'll probably have some conversation, I hope. And this letter just asked Mr. O'Brien to look at three particular conditions that he has. As far as the conditions presented by the Honorable Director, my client has told me that most of the conditions, the majority of the conditions he proposes, are acceptable, as I state in my letter. However, Condition D, Proposal D, we're only asking that an edit be made that the street, with the exception of Muzzy Street, in other words, that particular condition, if you read it, will say that we're not going to move forward and extend any other streets within the confines of the city of Revere, with the exception of the proposal before you. The paragraph F talks about Saugus filings, but it doesn't have in his letter any time frame for which Saugus has to act. So we have asked insertion in the conditions that a period of 90 days for Saugus to act be considered, and then after that, Caddy Farm would move forward with any development it had only in the city of Revere. Now, recent conversations, 90 days, the 90-day period. Recent conversations, I think Mr. O'Brien is here, he's asked for a little bit more time of that, and I don't have any opposition to that. He's looking to make the Saugus period of action to be 90 to, I believe it's 150 days. That period will give Saugus an opportunity to place the Saugus Route 1 access in a position that Traherne Street and Mildred Street will be laid out, accepted, and approved, and we hope to have construction, and those two roadways will connect to Muzzy Street that we hope this body and the Honorable City Council of the City of Revere will connect to. There's concessions that have been discussed amongst the parties. They are not fulfilled, i.e. the final negotiations, but I firmly believe that if this body takes action and shows that we're committed to going to Saugus Route 1, that the town Board of Selectmen in Saugus and that the planning board will take action to produce and approve Traherne Street and Mildred Street, galvanizing the Route 1 connection that everybody has wanted from the very inception of this project. I have Mr. Ogren here with me. He is the engineer for the project. He's now going to take you through exactly what's being laid out. There's also an opportunity for him to talk a little bit about our proposal in Saugus as far as making those roadways go to Saugus Route 1.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the Revere Planning Board. First of all, my name is Peter Ogren and I am with Hayes Engineering. We've been the engineers on Caddy Farm for probably the last 15 or 18 years. I'd like to pass out a conceptual plan that I will refer to a little bit later on in the presentation that talks a little bit about what we've been working on as far as the town of Saugus is concerned. Just to kind of further describe what Larry described is, as he indicated, the yellow is the holdings of Caddy Farm LLC in the city of Revere. It's in a mass of parcels that they've accumulated over the years. The original Caddy Farm goes back to, I think, the Donato's great-grandfather, but some of the acquisitions have been more recent. The green is what they own in Saugus, and the former Whaley's Restaurants stood in this location here. Mildred was referred to in this location here that Larry referred to, and also Traherne Street. They also own a parcel of land off of Warden Street in the town of Saugus, which is not currently part of this particular proposal. The proposal before you is designed to allow the highest body, the City Council in Revere, to lay out a way which will go from the Revere-Saugus town line over on the left-hand side of the sheet here, as you face it, through a turning circle which is designed for a future connection to connect back into the Saugus parcel, into Muzzy Street to terminate in a circle, and then a layout connection to Houston Street. The total distance is about 2,300 feet. And the exact dimensions of the pavement, sidewalk, drainage, and things of that nature is to be determined with the Revere Planning Board and probably the Revere City Engineer. I think he's filed a letter with your board indicating that the layout is acceptable, and by that I think he's talking about the alignment, the curves, the radii, and those things. The actual construction plans will have to come at a later date. The hope is that through a memorandum of understanding with the town of Saugus is that we will make this connection in Revere, and then there will be a layout that looks something like this, and I passed out those individuals so you each can see what it is. This is Mildred Street. The former Whalers stood on this parcel here. We, by the way, were the site engineers for Whalers at the time it was constructed. We're proposing a new state highway entrance at that location, both access and egress to enter into the Saugus parcel. We don't show it going any further than this, but as I indicated in the previous presentation, we're anticipating that ultimately it will connect to a turning circle that will be hopefully laid out by your body at this location in Revere and somehow circle back to that location so that there'll be able to be access and egress at Mildred Street and access and egress at Traherne Street. Those are actually both areas where there is kind of access now, although the access doesn't exactly follow what was laid out. All of these streets were laid out many years ago, actually before Route 1, the Bennett Highway, was built. In fact, this particular subdivision that these streets were laid out actually went across Route 1 to the area that's now with, I think there's a Home Depot or something over there now. So this particular proposal has been discussed with the State Highway Department. I think it's fair to say that all the engineers involved think it's a big improvement over the accesses that are out there now. And we have completed a plan very similar to the plan that's been filed with the City of Revere to show the layouts that are necessary to accomplish what we have to accomplish in Saugus. This is the access easement layout plan to lay out Mildred Street from Route C1 into the property. We show it stopping here because we don't know exactly how it might go through, depending on the types of uses that we go in Saugus. As far as Traherne Street is concerned, there's already been negotiations with the power company to be able to make that a 50-foot layout. It's now 40, and we think that the level of development anticipated requires a 50-foot layout. So there's already negotiations to gain the rights to land of New England Power, which is on the south side of the existing Traherne Street, and that will go, that layout will, 50-foot layout will go all the way to the city-town line, the Saugus-Revere town line, county line actually, too, and ultimately connect up with the layout that's presented here this evening, right at that location. I think that describes what we're planning, and hopefully I'll be able to answer any questions that the board might have.
Yes, I do. Looking at Mildred Street on your this photograph and the map that you pointed out, I see that at some point coming off Traherne, you're coming into Muzzy, but then you have a proposed future connection into Mildred Street, which is connecting onto Hood Street, and I don't see those in here anywhere, and I'm wondering where are they represented on this map and the construction area?
Those streets are actually off this plan. They're to the north of this plan.
And are they residential areas, or are they kind of like this industrial open space?
Most of Hood Street that's shown on this plan is unconstructed, but in Saugus it's a residential area, and it's our intention that that will not be an access. We show it connecting there, but it's our plan that there will not be a connection there if we are able to get the access to Route 1 in Saugus and if the memorandum of understanding is executed.
So any improvements here do not include access from Muzzy to Mildred or Hood?
It does to Mildred, because Mildred goes out to Route 1.
Well, that connects to Hood though.
Well, it connects to Hood, but you just block it off at Hood Street. The same as Larry indicated, that we're willing to not access Eustace Street if we're able to secure the Route 1 access. Bear in mind that the Route 1 access involves quite a bit of public participation. There'd be a MEPA filing and so forth for an ENF and an EIR for approval to connection to the highway.
I understand, but the streets that we're talking about that are being impacted by this project are outside of Revere and in Saugus, actually. Milford Street and Hood Street, is that true?
I think they have to understand that those are paper streets. None of those streets exist, sir. Those are all paper. It's not a residential.
A portion of Hood Street
Let me just-
does exist.
A portion of, one of the problems that the developer is working on with the town of Saugus is the zoning in the Whalers property. It's half residential, half business. That's how you see the building that once was Whalers in a B2 district. But all the roads you see that encompass the green area you've identified as the Whalers area, those are all paper streets. None of them are developed.
They're not developed, they're not being used, but they will be developed.
We're hoping, as we've told you, that we will attempt to do Traherne Street and Mildred Street, and the connection will move like this. You'll move from Saugus Route 1, up Traherne Street, into Revere, and then you'll come back out Mildred. But we'll also have Traherne Street as a two-way, to allow for traffic flow. That's the
And
goal.
what I'm trying to determine here, because I think the biggest issue is that, development and connection to Route 1, what's the impact to the town of Saugus and the people that live there? I guess that's the biggest thing I'm trying to determine right now.
Well, at this point, there'd be no development. We're not developing Hood Street. We've had plenty of time to develop it. Caddy Farm actually owns, 20 Bennett LLC, actually owns a home on Hood Street that we purchased along with a couple of acres of residential land in order to try to create what amounts to be, we hope to be a buffer area, think tall construction area. But if you would ever go up to that site, or if the board would ever take a look at the site, you'll see when you go to the plateau that is Whalers, there's a steep slope that goes down to the neighborhood, and that historically has been used as a buffer area between any development and the neighbors.
And understanding what the current streets are, paper streets or otherwise, I guess my biggest concern right now is when we look at this development, when it's developed, and frankly, I haven't seen or heard what the development is, how many units, or any of that thing, what's the expected traffic. Until I hear those things, and until I hear somebody tell me what's gonna be the impact on the town of Saugus, I don't live in Saugus, but I certainly don't wanna impact them. I'm a little concerned about voting on anything here tonight, really.
Well, we can tell you that, the market dictates the uses. There is some proposed uses, but we've been doing this for a while now. So I can tell you that 10 years ago, when we changed this land from RA1, single family, to HP, there were uses that were hot in the commercial and real estate area. We've always looked at mixed use as a potential primary use for the site, but now it seems like some commercial uses, which are better uses in the eyes of many municipalities, are coming to the forefront. So Mr. Ogren couldn't tell you what we're going to put there. I can't tell you what we're going to put there. The market will dictate it.
So, well, okay, and I guess, and please stop me if I'm going too far. I mean, we just went for a huge project. We just went for a huge project with HYM in which we spent a good part of a year talking about what's going in that property, what are the plans for roadways, what are the plans for accesses and exits, before the city came and the planning board made a decision on whether or not to approve it. You're asking us to approve something that we really don't know what the end picture's gonna look like.
We're asking this honorable board to lay out the extension from Muzzy Street. That's it. laying it out as a public way gives us the opportunity to connect to Saugus Route 1.
And-
That accomplishment will be a huge step in the development of this project.
But part of that extension includes connection to Eustis Street, which I understand is a huge concern for the people in Saugus. I don't know about Traeger and the other streets, what they're, and I'm sure there are gonna be people from Saugus speaking tonight. But until I know what's going in there, there's no way in the world you can tell me that the connection of impact right now is not gonna impact them, or that I should feel safe, and that there'll be no problems with those roads down the line. And if you can't tell me that, and give me the information and help me understand that, I myself can't vote for it, but I'll try and keep an open mind right now, but I'm not hearing anything that's making me feel warm and fuzzy about this.
Well, bear in mind that I made the statement that in order to ever connect to the state highway, we need a state highway connection permit. The effects of that from a traffic standpoint, from an environmental standpoint, will have to be vetted through the MEPA process. So to think that approving this layout is just carte blanche for everything we can do in Saugus, no, that's not true. There's site plan review in Saugus, and there's going to be a MEPA process. We've already been in to talk to MEPA about how to go about it, because they understand that the market dictates uses too. And so probably what's going to happen is we're going to look at a range of traffic flow, at a range of drainage issues, at a range of sewerage issues when we go through the MEPA process. But this approval does not open up wholesale development in the town of Saugus.
Which even more so makes me feel like the cart is coming before the horse right now.
Well, bear in mind, if we can't make this agreement between Saugus and Revere and limit the access to Eustis Street and Hood Street and I forget, there's one other street there, I can't remember the name of it. If we can't make that, we'll never get anywhere. You know, it's got to start somewhere, and it was decided to start here.
Chairman, frankly, because I'm confused. What we're doing here tonight is making changes so they can put a proposal forward. Am I correct or incorrect?
Well, they're coming, what I understand, they're coming to Revere first. They're basically forced Saugus's hand to proceed with approval for a Route 1 connection,
That seems to be
which is cart before the horse, but that's what they're doing, and that's what before you.
The project itself is not on the table now, whether it's going to be. And they can't do whatever they want if we approve this. They won't be able to do whatever they want, will they, Frank? They
No,
still
there's a
have
number of
steps.
approval processes for rezoning, development, and environmental reviews, and further approvals from the planning board for the construction of these roadways in Revere and in Saugus.
So this is the first step towards what could be an ultimate proposal that comes before us in the city council, the board of selectmen, so am I correct?
It should be the last step, but it's their first step.
Yeah.
That's fine.
I just don't want to think that if we approve something, they'll build whatever they want.
No, I'm not rambling, but I have the question that he just brought up was that we are forcing the town of Saugus their hand if we make a vote tonight. We shouldn't be forcing anybody's hand by making a vote. I mean, this is going to impact the town of Saugus. So that's all.
Right, we understand that.
I want to just want to get through it.
This is what, and we're getting a little sidetracked here. This is why we have all these conditions. We're gonna work on these conditions before this is.
Well,
Now, my question
Okay.
to you, Peter, now you come before us for the layout. Why is that the first step?
Frankly, because I've been project counsel to this project since 2010. In 2015, we were working with the town of Saugus to develop zoning. That effort yielded very little results. We tried. We've hired local counsel, Rick Magnan, to assist us since that time. And since 2016, we've been rather unsuccessful in moving the ball when it comes to new zoning. So our idea here is to kind of get right to the issue. The issue seems to be that the Eustis Street neighborhood is concerned as to what might go there. In Revere, we zone districts And these districts have uses. So people that live in a particular district has an understanding of the potential impacts in that district. Saugus's zoning, if you look at it, is, especially for this site, is antiquated. It only has it has a B2 zone, pretty much that takes over the Whalers property, and the rest is residential. Our hope is that they will provide at least what they call as the BHSD, the Business Sustainable Highway District, at some point. And that would help us be closer to have uniform zoning between Revere and Saugus. So this process does two things. One, it doesn't tip anybody's hand. It doesn't force anybody's hand. I respectfully disagree with the city planner. It provides a connection. This planning board doesn't approve dead-end streets. We're not the only planning board in the state that doesn't approve dead-end streets. This planning board has historically required a cul-de-sac at the end of any street newly developed. Well, in Traherne Street, as it's laid out, it kind of dead ends right in to Caddy Farms property. So if we went to them and said, we'd like to develop Traherne Street, they'd be looking for maybe a cul-de-sac at Traherne Street. I don't know. But if we present them a public way laid out by the honorable members of the city council and this honorable body, then they will be able to know exactly where Traherne Street will end up. When they approve Traherne Street, they'll know that it's a street that will go from the Saugus Route 1 to the connection that you see established in those plans. They will also know, when it comes to Mildred Street, where the connection will be made. In essence, once this body sets the ground rules by giving at least a layout of a public way, then Saugus will know how to treat both Traherne Street and Mildred Street. I tell you that I've done some work with people in Saugus. Nobody is against the Saugus Route 1 connection. They're concerned about the neighborhoods. We can't work on those issues until the development gets that principal access that nobody seems to disagree with. So that's why we're going forward. We're going to ask you to lay it out. You should know that Muzzy Street cannot be constructed without the body vote of this honorable body. This body solely controls construction of roads in the city of Revere. We will not be coming back to this body until such time that the people in Saugus, principally their Board of Selectmen and their Planning Board, have an opportunity to vote on our proposal for laying out public ways.
Do you agree to these conditions?
The conditions, as stated by Mr. O'Brien, as in my letter to you, I'm asking, and I think the city planner, although we're usually not on the same page these days, the city planner has spoken to Mr. O'Brien, and we're asking that you consider in paragraph D, Mr. Chairman. In paragraph D, it talks about the Revere connections, and it states that the interior roadway now proposed and approved makes no local connections, i.e. that Muzzy Street as proposed to this honorable body makes no other connections, and it doesn't. It only makes a connection to its existing roadway, i.e. the connection, the proposed Muzzy Street is to extend itself, which is 160 plus feet of public way. So I'd ask most respectfully that be edited to say connections to public streets in the city of Revere with the exception of Muzzy Street, because you are making a connection by extending it. So I just want clarity in that particular proposal. With respect to paragraph F, when it was presented and looked at, a lot of the information kind of outlines what we've discussed today, except for it doesn't give Saugus a time frame for which to act. And we think that is unfair. If you were to vote for this as a condition, and Saugus wants to sit on its hands, I'm not saying they will, but if they wanted to, or if Saugus wanted to deny the road, and we had to litigate things like that, it would take years, years. So we're going to give Saugus an opportunity, I believe we talked about 90 to 150 days, to review the two public ways we're proposing and take some action. And if their action is positive, then it sounds like we've got a plan. If their action is negative, well, then we go back to square one.
What is square one?
Square one is we develop the Revere parcel. It's 30 acres of developable land with the only access we have,
Where, Muzzy Street?
Muzzy Street and Eustace Street. The only public way we have. But again, we won't be able to do that without coming back to this honorable body. Remember, just for the record, it's the only public way that accesses 30 acres of Revere land. It's the only one.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Mr. O'Brien's letter, Mr. O'Brien's letter, section C, not a subdivision plan. The petition to the Revere Planning Board is not a subdivision plan. And any future subdivision plan would require another filing and further review and approval by the Revere Planning Board. That was the point I was trying to make. But I think, I don't know if this is the time to speak about this.
There's only one other thing, Mr. Chiloni. Yeah.
I think that Mr. O'Brien's letter, Mr. Simeone's letter, response to it has to be reconciled. Because these two, Mr. O'Brien's letter is something I think I can live with. There are portions of Mr. Simeone's letter that I think do put Saugus against the wall, that 90-day provision. And I think Muzzy Street has to. We need protection.
There's no bones about it. Everybody is in favor of this connection to Route 1.
Mm-hmm.
Only concern is the way it's laid out now, without the promise of that connection, that it leaves Eustace Street open for access and egress to this site. And that's our concern, that's Saugus' concern, it's even the proponent's concern. They said it, they don't want to use Eustace Street. So we're trying to work out language that protects the residents of Eustace Street.
But his answer to that, Larry's answer that after 90 days, if we prove his condition on Mr. O'Brien's letter, I find that nonsense.
Yeah, well, that has to be worked out.
But on the same token, through you, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Chiloni, to leave it unattended with no divide, with no line, is a deprivation of my client's property right to use the public way known as Muzzy Street. We're willing to work. I mean, but Saugus has to, whatever, within every time frame, Saugus has to make some action. Saugus doesn't make that action, then we don't get to move anywhere. So I offered 90 days for Saugus to act in my letter. I believe there was some conversation with your department, Mr. Stringy, to do up to 150 days, 120 days, whatever. I mean, rest assured, no one's going to put a stopwatch on the time. It's just a bar for us to all reach. We have no plans of trying to build this development without the best access possible. It's 46 acres. It's a very large development, including, like I said, we have 4 acres in Saugus on the Caddy Farm side and 13.7 acres in Saugus. We've got a substantial amount of investment in the Saugus property. We want the Saugus land to get Saugus Route 1 access. So we need to go forward. Somebody has to make a first move. We have worked very hard to try to get some zoning done there and have failed. So now with the roads at least being established, a potential use can now be laid out. It's closer, you can make uses and zoning decisions if you know how the roads are going to be laid out. And in this particular case, Saugus Route 1 is very important.
You can lay out the roads in the office. postponement, another,
Well,
like,
I-
90-day postponement.
Well,
Let you
on
come to
this,
August and then
on
come
this
back,
issue.
and then come back to one.
Well, and I was just gonna say is that in light of all of the communications, because up until today, this is all I got on it. Now, granted, I wasn't here at the last meeting, I don't know if there was discussion about it. But this is all I've got. Now all of a sudden, we've got all of this, we've got communications from a number of other people. There's a lot of information floating around, and I'm not ready, and I wouldn't feel comfortable on making a vote on this tonight.
The chair feels the same way.
That's obvious.
Do you have anything more to add?
The only thing is, in section, paragraph E, I'd be looking for a change that would, again, put a period of time for which Saugus to act.
We can't enforce
No,
it. We're not gonna open the door.
It's a condition that you're putting on my approval, Mr. Chairman, so you can enforce it. We have to give, we can't just let, this is Revere land, okay, not Saugus's land. We can't just let a town, take its time. We need to work together. Your vote today will bring that to fruition. The towns will work together. An MOU, a memorandum of understanding, is currently at the desk of the manager. My client has been talking to the manager through his representatives, specifically Mr. Ogren. But if nobody makes a move, then
What if we postpone today? For 90 days?
you're going to postpone it for 90 days?
If we do. I'm not saying we have.
You'll decide what the vote will be, but
But if we did that, you have 90 days to come back, and then we'll revisit the issue.
With all due respect, sir, we have been talking to the town of Saugus since the last meeting that your honorable body had. We postponed that meeting for a period of 30 days and more to move this project forward. And I think that action by this board and the city council will facilitate that action.
Listen,
yeah.
guys,
Go ahead. We could go on and on, but I
are
guess.
you done?
I am.
Okay. All right, I'll close. Are there any more proponents?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Robert O'Brien. Excuse me, I have a bit of a cold. I live at 10 Ocean Avenue, and I'm Director of Economic Development for the City of Revere. As you know from my letter to you, I am suggesting that you consider a conditional approval of this petition with a series of 6 conditions that were outlined for you. Let me say, first of all, this is a very complicated matter. As Attorney Simeone has suggested, it's been going on for a very long time. My recommendation for conditional approval is in the hope that we can make a small step in the right direction. And I think that would be represented by what I'm suggesting. I have been involved in this since I took this position almost 4 years ago. And it's been clear from the outset that there has been one intractable problem that has prevented progress on this matter. And that has to do with local access to this entire site. Not just in Saugus, but certainly in Saugus, in Eustace Street in particular, but also in Revere, Clifton Street, and other potential accesses. From the beginning, this has been the problem that has not allowed us to make significant progress on the issues which Commissioner DeVoe has suggested. On a master plan for the site, on zoning for the site, particularly in Saugus. So in order to get beyond that, I mean, literally, there has been a draft land development agreement, not unlike what was done for Overlook Ridge in Saugus, in Malden and Revere, that was going to outline the planning process for this site, including a master planning process, very similar to what happened in Suffolk Downs. Suffolk Downs was going on at the time we were discussing this, but it has not made progress because people are concerned, and appropriately so, about local access on Eustace Street. I agree with all of the concerns that were expressed in those letters, and undoubtedly with the concerns that will be expressed here today by the residents of Saugus. They are shared by the residents of Revere. The irony of it is that everyone in this room and outside of this room wants the Revere-Saugus connection to Route 1. Everybody agrees on that. The developer, Revere, Saugus, powers that be, the residents, all want that. Likewise, everybody, including the developer, has said repeatedly they do not want to have primary access to this site from Eustace Street or Clifton Street or any other, okay? Now, all of these things are tied in together with uses and zoning and so forth. But the effort was to abstract the access issues from the others and attempt to solve that. If we do get approval in Saugus of access to Route 1, which Revere cannot provide because we don't get to Route 1, only Saugus does, if we have that, then everything else falls into place. The master planning process begins, the zoning process begins, the planning board and everybody else can then do their work. If we get Revere access and Saugus access to Route 1, a plan which is outlined here and has already been filed with the Board of Selectmen, then the developer will concede forevermore anything but emergency access from the local streets in both Revere and Saugus. And if we get to that point, then we're all home free. But we haven't been able to move this for 4 years or more because this issue hasn't been solved. I think a conditional approval will solve that particular issue, that small threshold issue, which has prevented progress on everything else. All of those letters say they want Caddy Farms and the Whalers site developed. I mean, we all agree on all of this stuff. And by the way, this is not based on our expectation about what the powers that be in Saugus want. We have discussed this with the town manager and others. The 90 to 150 days was based on his suggestion that that is approximately the amount of time that it would take for the Saugus Planning Board and the Saugus Board of Selectmen to deal with this matter. Everyone wants it to happen. The worst case scenario is that it doesn't happen. Then we're dealing with the effect of having approved a plan which doesn't connect to anywhere. But the likelihood that that happens, from what everybody has said, publicly and privately, is almost zero in my opinion. What is holding us back from progress is one person is waiting for the other person to act and give up all of their rights, and then they will do it at some future date. This is an effort, hopefully, to move together to solve at least this issue so that other issues can be solved. Now, let me just say this. The conditions that are outlined here include address to the local connections in both Revere and Saugus, with the clear intent that they be restricted to emergency and maintenance vehicle access, as indeed they have been for Eustace Street for lo these many years. There are some suggestions that Attorney Simeone has made that there be a time frame, 90 to 150 days. I don't think that's unreasonable, and I don't think the town manager in Saugus thinks it's unreasonable. And that there be some indication that the continuation of the current practice of using Eustace Street only for emergency vehicles be dependent to some extent on some action by Saugus to get to Route 1. That, I think, is what Saugus wants, it's what Revere wants, it's what the residents in both community wants, and it's what the developer wants. I think we can get there, and then everything else happens. If we do nothing, I must agree with Attorney Simeoni based on my experience. If we do nothing, we're going to make no progress whatsoever. They want to solve all of their problems of zoning and utilities and so forth. That's not going to happen in this. They're only going to address the transportation issue. We want master planning process. Indeed, there's some consensus already on what the basic nature of the development will be. But we kind of can't get to the public process that will allow that to happen because, you know, the residents of Eustace Street are concerned, understandably. So are the residents of Clifton Street. So my suggestion is this. I think if we move ahead with these conditions, with some reasonable modifications, that everyone will be protected and we will make some progress. If in your wisdom, you decide not to, I would certainly not recommend that you disapprove this petition. It has already been filed with the town of Saugus. Presumably, Saugus will act expeditiously with or without this motion today, and we can then act in the wake of their effort. That is not an unreasonable approach. But I do think we need to make it clear to Saugus that we want this process to proceed expeditiously. Otherwise, we're going to be in the same holding pattern that we have been for 4 or 5 years.
My concern is, you know, it all sounds great, and I agree with you. My concern is, are we protected? That's what I'm concerned with. If we do allow this layout, and for some reason, Saugus says, no, we're not going to Route 1, you can't go here, you gotta go to Muzzy Street, or you gotta make a hole in Revere and go that way. Are we protected that they can't do this? That's what I want to hear.
I am not a lawyer,
You don't mind.
but as a practical matter, I think we are protected for the following reasons. Number one, we do not want Muzzy Street to be accessed to the development of this site in Revere or in Saugus. And number two, for any further development to happen, they must, as Attorney Simeoni has suggested, and as I suggest in my letter, they must come before this board and the city council and the city engineer for further approval. Now, is that completely without risk? No. Is it a way to advance this project? I believe so. If in your wisdom you decide that you want to postpone this and await for further action from Saugus, that is not illogical or unreasonable. But a conditioned approval with the conditions that I have outlined here, with some minor modifications, I think would not only protect us as a practical matter, but would also communicate to Saugus our desire to move this forward. Yes.
Question, so if I understand it correctly, if we approve it as it is, we're saying that the town of Saugus, you have 90 to 100 days, whatever it is we decide that time period is. And then, as I understand it, the way it stands now, at the end of that 90 to 100 days, if they don't make a decision, Eustace Street becomes the entrance and exit for this project.
Well, it already
The way
is.
it currently stands.
It already is.
Okay. But they couldn't proceed with the project and making that an entrance and an exit without our approval.
Well, a portion of Muzzy Street already exists. So the connection between Eustace and Muzzy Street, as has been indicated, goes back to 1916 or something of that kind. That exists. The extension of Muzzy Street is what is at issue here. I might also make one other point in terms of what was filed in November and what is filed now. The plan that was filed in November essentially made the connection to Muzzy Street in the direction away from Route 1. This plan makes the connection to Trahir Street and Mildred Street, which gets us to Route 1. And there have also been discussions between the developer and the town of Saugus that are resulting, hopefully, in a memorandum of understanding about how the entire process will proceed, including the signing of a land development agreement and a master planning process. I mean, everybody says they want to do the right thing. If everybody wants to do the right thing, we can make this happen.
Well, and the biggest issue and the biggest concern I have is really, frankly, it comes down to my mind holding a gun to the head of Saugus at this point, in terms of the deadline or us. And and it seems to me that we could approve this with a 60 to 90 day, giving Saugus the understanding that we approve of the project. We are waiting and looking for their approval of it within that period of time, and that's it. But I don't like the thing is that at the end of that 90 days, the project goes on and Eustace Street,
Well,
falls by the wayside.
let me just say this.
Go ahead.
The city of Revere and the town of Saugus work together on a lot of issues.
And that was one of the questions I was
Yes.
gonna ask.
We have a joint planning process involving the improvements on Route 1 that's funded, by the Mass Gaming Commission. This is one of many projects that we work on Saugus with, and frankly, it's not the most important one. There is no circumstance under which we intend to or would put a gun to Saugus's head. Absolutely not. And in fact, this results in part from our discussion with the town manager. Now, I think the town manager might well prefer that this be postponed again. But the idea is not to put a gun to Saugus's head at all. It's to move together on this. I mean, before the last hearing, Revere and Saugus, including the CEOs of both organizations, the mayor and the town manager and their staff, discussed how we could move forward on this. And it was made absolutely clear by the town manager that what he wants is access to Route 1. This is what they have now proposed to them, and this is what everybody else wants, including everybody in this room. So I think we can make a step in the right direction. Is there an absolute guarantee that if Saugus didn't do what it says it wants to do, that we would have to deal with the consequences of that? Yes, that could happen. It's not, but we could deal with it. There are mechanisms and venues to deal with it, including this board and all of the subsequent approvals that would be required. So I feel confident enough to have recommended this to you, and I still feel that. It's a decision that you have to make in your wisdom. It's not the only action. I think it is a positive and productive action with a very limited scope, Mr. DeVoe, as you indicated. This doesn't solve all of the problems. It's not intended to. That may be just why it will work.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, with your permission. This is very favorable, very helpful.
Yeah.
Your conditions. I want to be able to reconcile what you can agree with on Larry's response and what you can't. So from what you told us earlier in response to Mr. DeVoe, is that the Saugus 90 to 150 days that town manager Crabtree said he could work within 90 to 150 days. Is that correct?
Yes, I would, however, say it is not, in my view, an absolute deadline. It is our expectation of how long this will take to resolve.
We could work something like,
I think so.
like the parties will make every effort to.
Or it is expected that it will be resolved within 90.
Rather than making it a hard and fast.
I agree.
line.
Yes.
That was number one suggestion. Number two, on paragraph E,
Yep,
in which Mr. Simeone wants to change that, eliminate Muzzy Street. With respect to Muzzy Street, Saugus Connections, given deprivation of County Farms property right with respect to public way, Muzzy Street would result in this condition of public do not consent and ask that this entire paragraph be deleted as a condition.
I disagree with that,
You can't live with that.
and no, absolutely not.
So, and then in paragraph F, you think, Frank, do you think that if we put a condition of the parties will make every effort to reconcile or do that within 180 days? Because you can do it tomorrow.
Exactly.
So you just, the 180 days doesn't have to be 90 to 180, because if you can do it in 85 days,
Correct.
you need 90.
I have no problem with
You have
paragraph,
no problem with
with
that.
the addition of the 90 to 120
Well, I was
days.
gonna say 180, because they can do it before 180 if they want, right? What do you think, Frank?
I don't have a problem with paragraph F.
As it stands?
90 to 100, adding 90 to 120 days, even giving them up to 120 days, giving them some more latitude.
Up to
Planning this
120 days. And do you think, the thing is, to Mr. DeVoe's point, you don't want to make it hard and fast. right?
Absolutely, I agree, yeah.
And so we could, Frank, can we live with, and the parties will make every effort to resolve this within 120 days? Paragraph F.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would also note, by the way, just Mr. Ogren's point.
I'm not making my decision until after we hear the opponents, so I know you people, you folks have been waiting patiently to give your side of the story, so I'm just trying to get what the position of the proponents are before I listen to the opponents, okay, is that fair? Is that fair? And
I think the roadblock here is paragraph E,
paragraph
since we're
E,
separate, we're
so,
apart.
and that's why we discussed
But I
paragraph
think Attorney
E,
Simeone has suggested alternate language that would try to mediate that.
so we won't be able to make a motion today unless you two agree on all the language. I understand. Have equal time? That's- And so, and paragraph D, you're comfortable with Mr. Simeone's language?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes without saying, but yes,
D's okay, E's not, you have to be modified, right?
right.
Thank you, I just want to understand. Because this whole thing, all these plans and stuff, these letters are what's the most important. This is crystallizing.
Yeah. I will say this, I agree much more with what Attorney Simeone said today than what was in that letter. I would not accept that letter as written, as a modification of our conditions. I would also say with regard to E, I think the question is whether Republic Properties is forevermore surrendering the right to use Eustis Street as an access to this site unless and until the Route 1 option is approved. What we're talking about here is a quid pro quo. And I mean, there is some understanding that they won't give up everything until they get something. I think that's not unreasonable. But it's important that it be done reasonably expeditiously, because it's been going for years now.
I just want to understand.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
okay.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien. Okay, I'm going to close that side of the hearing. Any proponents? Opponents. Please state your name for the record.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Board. My name is Attorney Jesse Schomer, represent the town of Saugus. We're here at the direction of the town manager, Scott Crabtree. I'm going to take issue with a number of things that Attorney Simeone said in his presentation, but maybe I could just give a little bit of background to the board. As has been mentioned multiple times, this has been going on for years and years and years. Most recently, my understanding is that there was a sit-down between the town and the developer back in 2015 or 2016 regarding this. And the way those discussions were left was the town of Saugus said, well, give us a plan of what you're proposing. And this touches on a point that you made, sir, regarding what's actually being proposed back there, and not just building roads to nowhere. What are you planning on doing? And the answer to that was radio silence on the part of the developer. So when this proposal reached our desk late last year, our concern was, again, what's being proposed back there. So we had requested of the developer, and this was communicated with the planning department in Revere and with the mayor's office, what the town of Saugus needs to get is once again a plan of what's actually being proposed. And what that plan, in order to get Saugus's approval, would need to show is a permanent relinquishment of any and all access to and from Saugus local roads other than emergency vehicles only. We need to see a plan showing that as a precondition for any discussion, formal or otherwise, of any kind of memorandum of understanding or development agreement. Those words have been tossed around tonight. Since the last hearing of this board, we have received nothing from the developer. So that is the reason why there has been no movement between the developer and the town of Saugus since the last hearing of this board, because we simply haven't received the plan. We've received a number of calls from representatives from the developer trying to get us into a meeting without having seen any plans, and those overtures were rejected, frankly, because as we have said all along, you need to show us what you are planning on doing back there, and once we know what that is, then maybe we'll be in a position to reach a memorandum of understanding, but not before. And we're certainly not going to be going into discussions like that with a ticking clock of 90 to 120 days. You know, and on that note, I'd like to point out something that Attorney Simeoni mentioned several times. He said something to the effect of Saugus has to take action, or we're giving Saugus a chance to take action. Saugus doesn't have to do anything here. The developer has to come to the town of Saugus, meet their conditions, meet their bylaws for any and all local approvals that they need for the road, for the development, and once that is achieved, then Saugus has the ability to take action. Saugus isn't going to be forced into doing anything simply because they're not acting on the same timetable as the developer would prefer. And once again tonight, and coming back to the point that you made, sir, the only specifics that they've given you with respect to what's actually being planned back there is that the market will dictate the uses. It's not satisfactory to the town of Saugus, and I don't think it should be for this board. So the request from the town manager's office, and I have a letter that I'll hand up. I don't feel the need to read it into the record. There were already a number of letters read into the record at length. The town manager's request would be that this matter be continued for further development of the talks between the developer and the town of Saugus with respect to this plan, and ideally with respect to a memorandum of understanding, because I would agree with Mr. O'Brien. Everyone here agrees, and the town of Saugus certainly does, that access should be via Route 1, but that has to be permitted, and we're not going to be doing that under a timetable that's requested by the developer. So I would respectfully disagree with Mr. O'Brien to the extent that he would suggest that the board take action on a conditional approval. We would request that the board continue this matter further. You suggested 90 days. I think that's appropriate to let the conversations between Saugus and the developer continue. And ideally, by that point, 90 days from now, maybe the developer will have something more specific for you with respect to what's actually being planned there. So I'll conclude my remarks, and I appreciate the opportunity from the board to speak tonight. Again, this is a copy of the town manager's letter.
It's nice to hear finally from the town manager, so, you know, we've been told, and I know Mr. O'Brien, you know, people have had meetings on this. Now, so it's nice to hear some official. It would be nice if he came, but it's nice to hear from you, sir, and we appreciate the time.
I want to ask you one question. Mr. O'Brien's conditions,
Yep.
what's your feeling about that? Now, he has no timetable.
Yeah. Well, as has been mentioned several times by members of the board, this proceeding here is really the cart going before the horse. And I think it's pretty clear from what Attorney Simeoni said that this is an attempt to force the town of Saugus to take action because the town of Saugus isn't acting in accordance with the developer's timetables. And I can sympathize. I represent a lot of developers in my practice, and you always want the town to move faster than they do. You always want to keep your options open as late as you can. But unfortunately for the developer, in this case, neither of those is going to be an option. With respect to the specific conditions, from the town of Saugus's perspective, the reason why, and a particular reason why, and you haven't heard anything about this before because this is a specific issue, the reason why the approval shouldn't go forward in Revere before it does in Saugus is because a portion of this parcel is actually located in the Saugus Business Highway District, which forbids connections to local roads. So the town of Saugus actually could not approve a road, the Trahere Street connection, if there is a connection through to Saugus local roads. That's under zoning, and if they come to the planning board and try to get a subdivision approval, that would be our recommendation, and the project would be dead in the water. And then we would be back at the position where this board has approved a conditional approval with an access through, as council acknowledged, through Muzzy Street and Eustis Street to the Revere parcel, which would effectively allow them to start developing.
Frank, so I can understand precisely what we're dealing with right here. We need Saugus, Revere needs Saugus approval to get through their streets to get to Route 1. We can't reach Route 1 from Revere. Ramsey Street doesn't go. So that's where the cooperation has to be done, through Saugus and Revere. And everybody in this room, this board, Mayor Rego, Town Manager Crabtree, we all agree that this project can go forward if the primary access, the only secondary roads for emergencies, can go through there, right?
Correct.
So does that crystallize what this is?
I think so.
That roadway, Revere can't unilaterally get to Route 1, and we can only go through Saugus, and that's what's all this development. That's basically what
And that was gonna be my question, is just trying to understand where the issue was. It's certainly, I see Eustace as the bullet in the gun. I see the problem being currently for her and Mildred Street's access to Route 1, and as you pointed out, it's a zoning issue that needs to be overcome. So that being said, what is the town of Saugus's, just to better understand, what's the purpose behind the town of Saugus holding that back or delaying on giving the developer that approval to Route 1?
I don't think there's any delay, and there's certainly no unwillingness on.
What's their concern, I guess, is the word.
I wouldn't even say that there is a concern. I think we're in agreement that the access should be through Route 1. The problem is they need to provide the plan of what they're actually proposing to do, and then they need to go through the permitting process to get that approved. And that's the first step, as several of you have mentioned. And just one thing to come back to your point, sir. Town Manager Crabtree couldn't be here tonight. He had a death in the family recently. However, there are 2 members of the Board of Selectmen who are here tonight.
I have very respect for Town Manager Crabtree. This shit was cousin, so I'm familiar with Saugus now.
Are there any more, are you finished?
I'm finished. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any more opponents?
Anthony Cogliano, Chairman of the Saugus Board of Selectmen. Not to be redundant, but it is putting the cart before the horse. We will not rezone anything on Route 1 until we know exactly what we're voting on. So that's the first step. You know, I can tell you from my point of view, I don't oppose development. I think it's great that you people are so supportive of Saugus here tonight. I can't thank you enough. But we need to know what we're voting on before we do it. That's it. Thank you very much.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Deborah Panetta. I live at 1 Bellevue Street in Saugus, and I'm also on the Saugus Board of Selectmen. Caddy Farms, we've been hearing about this for many, many years. I was at that 2015 meeting, and that's when the developer and his representative promised that they were going to have a full plan to provide to the town of Saugus so that we could better understand the development. It's my understanding we still don't have that master plan. I talked with our town attorney, and I also spoke with our town manager prior to this meeting. And it's not that we don't want to move forward, it's just that we just haven't received what we've asked for. So I really appreciate the concerns that the planning board has brought forward this evening, working with our town. It really moves me. I really appreciate that, because Saugus and Revere, we need to work together. So whatever we need to do, that's what we want to do. And again, I really appreciate everything that you've said this evening. And we have a meeting tonight. Our Board of Selectmen has a meeting tonight at 7, so I'm going to have to be leaving shortly. So thank you, as well as our chair. Thank you.
How you doing? Robert Camuso Sr., town meeting member, precinct 2, and I do live on Eustace Street. Robert Camuso, C-A-M-U-S-O. I've had multiple conversations with the developer, of these people. Some of them hot and heavy, some of them casual. It's been pretty casual. I am absolutely not in favor of this project, period, because I'm a direct abutter pretty much. I've contacted Chief Newberry. He hasn't had one conversation about an emergency access in Saugus, so there's never been any contact from the fire department. I talked to him January 13th. There's never been any conversation about emergency access to this property. I'm I'm here representative for Precinct 2. I'm also a resident representative here as direct. I just want to suggest that you people are not in favor of passing this tonight. Thank you very much.
Anybody else? Come on down, behind the post.
How you doing? Thanks for letting us talk tonight. I'm Joe Vecchione. I wrote that maybe long-winded letter out to you. Precinct 2 town meeting member. But again, thanks for letting us talk tonight. So just going off the memorandum of understanding that the town manager is working on, I recommend a couple items be added to that. I think it should include a commitment, not just intentions of what is proposed at, these local roads, including but not limited to Hood Street, Laurel Street, Clifton Street, and Salem Street. For example, the developer earlier tonight, or the attorney representing the developer, said, okay, we own the house at 29 Hood Street. We plan on it to be a buffer zone. We just need it in writing. And going forward with the other roads, so the September plan showed connection to Laurel Street. It was removed from this plan, but we don't have an idea of could this be a future connection. We want peace, or the residents seek peace of mind for all these roads. And yeah, again, just peace of mind is what we're looking for. The second item is, as Robert just came up and said, the fire chief from Saugus has not been notified. I think a recommendation from the fire chief on the most appropriate points of emergency access should be made. He just needs to be contacted and included in this collaborative process that we hope to have with Revere. So thank you.
Thank you. Any more?
I am Helen Folashewski. I'm a resident of Eustace Street, and this has been going on for quite some time. But this is really all about making an informed decision, right? And so that's why I really do think that you need to postpone making a decision tonight, because I don't think that you have all the facts and all the information for you to take into consideration to make an informed decision. Likewise, that's the reason why the town of Saugus hasn't been able to do that. I think that Attorney Simeone has talked about, these plans and that Saugus hasn't come forward and Saugus hasn't done it. But it was already stated here tonight that when somebody wants to build something or somebody wants to move forward, they really need to come up with a full plan to somebody. Saugus, the town of Saugus has enough building happening. They don't need to go door to door looking for someone to build. So the builders, the engineers, whoever, the landowners, they need to come to the town. They need to present an informed plan, because we can't make an uninformed decision. What people don't recognize is, those are old roads. The structure of them is not in great shape to use Eustace Street and the comment that I'll make that was made earlier by Mr. Simeone about the Schultz home that was on Muzzy Street. If you were to go there, you would not know there was a street there. It was a dirt path. It was not paved. It was not very far up on the left. You would not have known it was a street. So to consider that a street, it just isn't accurate. If you also look on the street, there's also at end of the street, there was a sign that had the weight of what vehicles could pass on that street. And that sign has mysteriously disappeared, but it was, it spoke to the tonnage, and so that it couldn't have those heavy vehicles, and that's been a whole other issue. But I think that I appreciate that you guys have taken the time to listen to all of us, that you are taking the time to really make an informed decision. I hope that you do, because all of the information isn't there, right? And so to really make a decision that's going to benefit the people of Saugus, the people of Revere, North Revere, it's a highly trafficked area. You're talking about bringing in a lot of cars, and you need to do it in a way that's going to be safe for everyone. Life isn't always fair, but I do believe that your duty is to make things safe for your community. And that's what I'm asking you to do. Thank you.
Any other proponents?
Hi, my name is Tony Chanker. I live on Clifton Street in Revere, Mass. And me and Bob, we're on the North Revere neighborhood group, and a lot of our people are just concerned about the traffic and stuff like that there. And we know something has to go in there, but we need a little more discussion. Right now, it's like no one knows anything, and we're trying to put A to B and figure it out, and it's stuff like that there. And we just, in the dark right now, and maybe we'd like to have more group meetings, like we're supposed to have our meeting at 6:30 tonight at the hotel, which we normally do once a month, and we were gonna discuss it tonight too, and we want more input into it. We know something has to go in here, we want something good for the community, and, you know, we just don't want fight. Half these people in Saugus, I know them as friends, because half my street is, Clifton Street is Revere, the other half is Saugus, and, you know what I mean, we're neighbors, and we shouldn't be fighting, we should be discussing how to develop this in a friendly manner, and not, you know, it shouldn't be like a politics. You like this politic, I like that, and it gets out of hand, and we really, yeah, yeah, but we just want to understand what's going on, which, you know, I know this project quite well. I've worked up there for quite a few years, and I know the project, and but I know something has to go in, and we just want to know what's going in and what that, and not everybody wants, everybody's, I don't want it on my street, like any project comes in, oh, I don't want that in my neighborhood, you know what I mean? But this we know has to come in, and we just want to understand what's coming in, and we always thought it was going to be Route 1 in and out. So if we can solve that problem, that would get us the first step to go on to the second step, okay? Thank you for listening.
Robert Palmisano, 38 Franklin Street. I'm also a Revere resident. I agree with their counsel, and in fact, that the developers should sit down, come up with a plan, submit it to Saugus before you guys vote on anything. And it affects the neighborhoods, and we all end up with something we don't want. So I don't want to take up your time, but that's just my feeling.
Sorry, could you just repeat your name again?
Robert, last name is Palmisano, Palmisano. All right, thank you.
Any other opponents?
Just very briefly, my name is Chris Riley, 7 Ocean View Ave in Saugus. I'm also a town meeting member from Precinct 2, which is the Cliftondale area in question. First off, I would like to thank the Revere Planning Board for your consideration of Saugus. It means the world, especially to the neighbors in that area. Thanks very much. We're very grateful for that. I would like to ask this board, because I do agree with the further stipulations that Mr. Vecchione stated a few minutes ago, about additional protections. So what I'm asking is that this board would postpone a vote on this issue to give the developer and the town of Saugus and their council to work further to iron out these last issues. As everyone has said, I think there's general agreement that the right place to access this land is from Route 1. But let's take some additional time, please, if you would postpone this, to let the developer and the town of Saugus work out last details. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Any other opponents? Any other opponents? Hearing none, seeing none.
Mr. Chairman, there were two other communications I'd like to just place in the file that, from opponents. One, Patricia Scanlon, Saugus resident from 18 Norman Street, and Denise Cheney from 148 Essex Street, Saugus. I'm going to put those on file.
Hold off.
Opponents.
Yes. All right. Opposed? You want to have a discussion? I think we should have a discussion. Go ahead. Public hearing. I think they are right. I think we do need a plan. We just can't make a decision without knowing exactly what's going there. You know what I'm saying? We're all discussing everything, but we really don't know what we're discussing. So, I think this time, take 30 or 90 days and make a motion.
What we could do, make a motion for another postponement, 90 days. Let the powers that be work it out.
Frank, what do you think?
Well, it's only when we come to an agreement tonight on language that would protect the city of Revere. It's August. Don't access to uses
we're off a little bit on that. Close to an agreement on the terms of that language. If that could be worked out this evening, I'm not sure. I think we're still stuck on paragraph E, the Saugus connections, where Revere's condition would say that Revere Planning Board approval is conceptual roadway plan is conditioned on this Eustace Street link continuing to be restricted to emergency and maintenance vehicles. That's the language in paragraph E, part of the conditions.
So that's our protection.
Yes, and at this point, I can't speak for the proponent, but I'm not sure if they're willing to go that far and give up that connection that they have.
You want to have, less of a time postponement, Frank, and see if they can't get together, we could kind of facilitate something on E.
We could do that, or, I mean, the other option is to continue it until Saugus has plans allowing the connections from Muzzy Street to Eustace Street. Seeing that, right now we have plans before us with a Muzzy Street layout that does not connect to anything in Saugus other than Eustace Street. So we're put in a difficult position here to move this forward without protecting Eustace Street, unless the attorney can come up with some language that we can all agree on.
Mr. Chairman, addressing the city planner's comments, he's absolutely correct. I mean, paragraph E, for us to agree for a period of 90 to 120 days, as discussed between the director, Mr. Crabtree, and others, offers a significant amount of protection, because as we stand right now, Muzzy Street is 160 feet. It's been extended by your board an additional so many feet, and it's a public way. And it's been approved by this board, and it can be constructed at any time, extended at any time, and we could go and start a development now. But it can't. No, all we can do was, but right now, our property rights, the rights of the developer, is that they can use that land for the limited purposes in the HB district. This community saw fit to designate the Highway Business District. We've made that attempt in Saugus. They have not. They want they want a developer to tell the town what they're going to build before they want to approve it. Let's take them at their word, okay? So they're never going to vote for anything in Saugus unless some developer, my developer, knows exactly what he's going to do. Well, we don't. It'll be dictated by the market. No. If anything, that would be a deprivation of my client's rights. My client can build in the Muzzy Street and our Revere property now. We're trying to meet everybody halfway. We're basically saying we'll take the layout, so now Saugus knows what we need. It's their turn. They'll make the appropriate actions that will be filed with the planning board and the Board of Selectmen. Nothing's going to be decided as to what's going to go there because Saugus hasn't approved the zoning.
So you can't agree with Section E? You can't agree with...
I'm saying that if you grant Section E and allow a time frame for Saugus to act, which is what the director and myself and I believe the city planner, of 90 to 220 days, it just gives them a line in the sand, if you will. Make some effort. Show what effort you're going to make to bring this thing to fruition. I have been involved in this project since 2010. The only people that are working to make this land developable are your residents, the Revere residents. the Saugus, when we came to them after the city council, the honorable members of the city council in 2010, made that 28 acres highway business land. Should not be unusual. Developed asset. 30 acres of Revere land is an undeveloped asset. I'm going to digress just for a moment. The town of Saugus voted for something that they call the BHSD, the Business Sustainable District. That's what they approved. They approved a zone 3 miles long along the corridor of Saugus Route 1. The focus of that development was to identify undeveloped parcels that were locked between Saugus Route 1 and the neighborhood in order to make them developable. That was the focus. We're there. We're that piece of land in the middle. Caddy Farm is that piece of land in the middle. Since that time, they've developed 4 projects, over 1,500 units of development, and they're going gangbusters. Good for them. But you know what they want you to do in Revere? Take your time. Give us time. We need time. The director has been here since the Arrigo administration commenced. He told you, I'm telling you, since 2015, we've made no progress with the town of Saugus on the issue of zoning. And they told you why. Because, okay, if we don't tell them what's going to go there, they're not going to vote for it. The point is, that's not the way it's done in the city of Revere. It's not. The city of Revere has a district, the Highway Business District. It has a table of uses. It has a table of dimensional controls. Okay, so the point is that if you don't at least come up with some line, the parties have to, a goal, if you will. If you just allow my client to sit back and wait while they take no action, okay? And if they do take an action, with all due respect, what if they take a negative action and we have to appeal? You're only hamstrung your own developer and your own property.
What we're hearing tonight is Saugus asked you to provide plans for them, and they have not received them yet.
Saugus asked us to, let me take a step back. We received communication where the Saugus's manager laid out a couple of conditions, one of which is a site plan for the entire site. He doesn't just want to know what's going on in Saugus. He wants to know what's going on in Revere. We have developed a Saugus scenario, which Mr. Ogren is working on and should have to him within this week. We're also filing for the Trahere Public Way, and we're filing for the Mildred Public Way. We're also filing for the Warden Street Public Way. We're going to move this project forward, and the actions taken by this developer are the same actions that were laid out in the Land Development Agreement, an agreement that your city and your consultant spent 18 months to 2 years in the making, but yet the parties couldn't find a way to sign it. I can only tell you, I think the director is telling you candidly, it's not unreasonable for you to vote on a conditional approval and let the honorable members of the city council vote in order to move forward. The honorable members of the city council are vested with the power to lay out this road, and that's all you're doing, is laying out a road. You're not building a road, you're going to be the ones who build the road. So most respectfully, I ask you to vote conditionally. As far as the couple of things that we disagree on, we can attempt to agree on those conditions, but this matter really does need to come to some fruition.
If there was a motion on the floor now to, the only condition would be Mr. O'Brien's letter without considering our response to that letter, would you be happy with that?
I can't see they wouldn't be happy. The only reason why is because, frankly, we need some type of time frame. If I were to say to any member,
This is the crux of the matter.
but though Mr. O'Brien had just testified, I don't have to testify for Mr. O'Brien. Mr. O'Brien's here. He said that he would agree to 90 and 220 days.
He's trying to bring everybody together. That's what
I think
Mr.
he is
O'Brien's
reasonably trying
But I don't
to
understand
set a mark.
why your company didn't go in front of Saugus and say, this is what we're gonna build. 500 units, 100 units, 50 houses? What are you gonna do there?
Because we don't know what's going to be there.
Can't go to these
We
people.
also owe that to the residents of North Revere. They want to know what's going to be built there.
Exactly.
This is the cart before the horse.
You know, it's just.
But the residents in North Revere, Mr. Chairman, the residents in North Revere, unlike the residents in Saugus, they know what can be built there. They can look at their zoning law, their ordinance, they can identify uses that can go there, they can identify dimensional controls for buildings, setback requirements, because Revere has done the work through its planning department to establish a district.
Well, you're
That's
not
not the
making
case.
yourself friends with all that. But be it as it may, I think you two should get together and get this straightened out.
I would respectfully request that if you can't make a decision, Mr. Chairman, that you postpone this matter for 30 days.
Everybody says postpone.
I would postpone it 30 days.
30 days.
Frank, what do you think?
Well, do you think 30 is a good frame?
Work on the language. Yeah. Provide more, show us more progress in Saugus. We'll continue our discussion with the Saugus town manager.
Let's move the previous question. I make a motion that we postpone this matter for 30 days. I second. For no more than 30 days. And then you
Second
can,
by Mr. Delvecchio.
wait, Frank, you can make a meeting within 30 days, right? Okay, within 30 days.
Better than a no.
Thank you.
And you guys, you folks were all saying postpone, right? That's what I was hearing, so. We didn't get the whole 90, but we got 30, so, we're here to fight another day. Job security.
All right. Can we vote?
I need a second. Okay. That's up to the chairman.
On the motion by Mr. Chiralone, second by Mr. Delvecchio, to postpone planning board decision 30 days. Continue this hearing 30 days. Mr. Rico? Yes. Mr. Chiralone?
Yes.
Mr. Delvecchio?
Yes.
Mr. Simone? Yes. Mr. Vogt?
Yes.
Giovanni? Yes. And there's absent, Mr. McCann.
Yes.
So ordered. Another 30 days, and more continue discussion for Saugus, and hopefully get to a resolution.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members.
Thank you for everybody for your attendance tonight. It's been a long afternoon.
See you next month.
We can't mess with Saugus. We all eat in Saugus, you know? Do you want this stuff?